We do really take pride in the fact that we have experiential learning where the kids are using what we call the third classroom, which is our natural campus environments. And what makes this school absolutely unique is being on 56 acres and 3,000 feet of shoreline on one of the beautiful Muskoka lakes, Lake Rosseau. Physics classes that are out in the canoes, studying the maximum efficiency of a canoe. They are very aware and cognizant of the fact that there is an addictive nature to social media, to scrolling, and having an online presence. We actually had one student laughing that when we had a power outage and said, "I wish we had more no power days." It's always a highlight of my day when a student will stop by my office and say, "Mr. Krocker, do you mind if I have a moment? I've got an idea." I will cancel a meeting. I will attend an online meeting late. I think it's such a healthy sign when students, aka the users, are thinking of ways that the school and programming can improve.
What is one thing that not many people know about you?
That I was a...
Really? There's no way my research would have pulled that out, Dave. So I appreciate you sharing that. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Learn It podcast, Behind the Chalkboard. Dave, I am so excited to have you joining us today. I was telling you behind the camera and to the listeners that are seeing now, I wish I could be on campus because that is such a beautiful place to be. I hate that we have to do this remotely, but it's definitely on me. And Dave, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more and even for our listeners to learn a couple of things from you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to join you.
Absolutely. So why don't we kick on in, Dave? I mean, when I was doing a bit of research, it seems like you're quite the traveler. Sounds like you've been to different places around the world. I believe you started in Alberta. You spent some time in Guatemala. You're now in Ontario. Can you spend a bit of time to walk our listeners through this incredible journey that you've been on as it pertains to education?
Absolutely. And I do feel very blessed and privileged to have had the experiences that I've had. So when I graduated from the University of Calgary in the mid-90s, there were very few teaching positions available at that time in Alberta. And so what I did was I went to a recruiting fair at Rosseau College, and I discovered as a young teacher this thing called international teaching. And it was very lucrative for me as a young teacher, both for experience, professional development, and compensation, to be very honest. So I started off in Quito, Ecuador, at an international school there, Colegio Interamericano de Guatemala, was down the road. But I started with at Interamericano in Quito, Ecuador. From there, I went back to Alberta to the public school system for 6 years. And my wife and I took our two little daughters, Lexi and Reina, at the age of 3 and 5 to the international school Bangkok, where we were there for 8 years and absolutely loved it. From there, we went to Lakefield College School, where I was one of the assistant heads of school. And from there, we went to Guatemala to an international school where I, as the high school director, was very fortunate to open up a brand new state-of-the-art academic facility. And from there, we have now arrived what I'd like to call home, which is now at Rosseau Lake College as the head of school.
Beautiful. And so tell me what the difference is out of naivety, right? I mean, I did my high school in Uganda, and now when I go to schools in Canada, everything seems so different. Walk us through, just out of curiosity, what was the education system like in Guatemala and Thailand? And how is that different from what we see in Canada and Alberta and Ontario?
Absolutely. It's a great question. So if I think about the international school Bangkok, it was primarily an international baccalaureate school. And so the IB diploma program was very academically rigorous. And so what I would say is the difference here is that we have a bit more of a balanced approach to holistic well-being in students. I feel the IB diploma program, for example, is excellent for some kids, but it is grueling. And I think there's an impact. I think many kids end up having to sacrifice co-curricular opportunities, sometimes social opportunities, in pursuit of their academics. And like I said, for some kids and families, I think that's great. I don't know if it's for everybody. I can say this, I'm very happy in my current role at the school that I'm at, Rosseau Lake College, and a bit more of a balance towards wellness and the student experience.
Right. Let's dig deeper into that, Dave, if you don't mind. What, when you say the balance, and I do believe that it's extremely important because those are the type of, learnings that you also get. And oftentimes we discount the type of learnings that we get from there. What is an ideal balance in your mind? I mean, is it 50-50? Like you should be sort of half and half in terms of your academics versus your co-curricular? Should it be 70-30? What's sort of a good balance for schools?
Um, Here's one thing I know, one point I know and that I believe in, and I know I'm supported by our athletic director here, Miss Jackie Priolo, is I believe kids need a minimum of 1 hour of active time every single day.
Hmm.
And so here we have every day after school co-curricular programming that lasts from approximately 3:30 to 4:30. So that minimum hour to me is exactly that, a minimum. I know we're continuously looking for increased opportunities to have kids outdoors and active. So I think that in our current model that our students are outside and active every day, but I would like to see it increased from the minimum of an hour a day to upwards of 2 to 3 hours a day, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you think it's partially also because of the benefit of your location in terms of being at a space where it is easy to be outdoor and it is beautiful to be outdoor and there is nature there where being outdoor is refreshing versus if you're like in a city, in a busy city, sometimes that might even be more annoying to be outside and listening to traffic horns. So is that a benefit of the location you would say as well? Would you replicate that if you were to say be in a school in downtown or in a more crowded place?
Oh, I think that's one of our signature assets. And what makes this school absolutely unique is being on 56 acres and 3,000 feet of shoreline on one of the beautiful Muskoka lakes, Lake Rosseau. And I love the fact that I know that there are English classes that are out in the forests doing something one of our teachers calls extreme reading, or you have your chemistry class doing water sampling down at the lake or a pond on our natural campus. Um, we have, physics classes that are out in the canoes studying the precise angles of the paddle stroke and the maximum efficiency of a canoe and friction on the water. So we do really take pride in the fact that we have experiential learning where the kids are using what we call the third classroom, which is our natural campus and environment.
Yeah, yeah. Consider me a little bit jealous, Dave, of just being on that campus. I didn't get to grow up there. But one of the things I'd love for you to share with which we were doing a bit of research, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but during your time at Alberta, I think you really went, you got a grant that helped you transform classrooms. It sounds like an extraordinary project. I mean, I heard that, you removed walls out of the classroom and you did some crazy cool stuff. So to walk us through what that experience was like and what was that about?
So it was, I was a very young teacher. I was at H.J. Cody in Sylvan Lake, which is in the Chinook's Edge School Division. And we received a grant. It was $1 million. And the acronym was ACE, which stood for the Alberta Initiative for School Improvement. And so myself and a small team of teachers there, under the blessing of a very progressive principal at the time, literally blew it all up. And we looked at what was very traditional education, where there were standalone courses of English, social studies, and information technology. And we combined all three of those curricular areas into what we called a humanities program. And the humanities program was exactly that. It was an integration of all three of those subject areas into project based learning. And
Mm.
we transformed what was previously the library and then a separate space, the technology lab, and two traditional classrooms. We literally removed all of the walls and created this massive, what I call like was an early adopter of makerspace, where it was a large collaborative gathering space with large tables where groups of students would be working, sometimes independently and often collaboratively, with 3 to 4 different teachers roaming through, working alongside of students instead of standing up in front and delivering content. We were facilitating their learning. And a phrase, buzzword that we often use is we really shifted the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. And it was a fabulous experience to start my career.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like something on paper that would be incredible. Is there something that you learned that was like, this really worked well or this did not work well? Is there something that you were surprised by in that new approach that you took from a physical environment perspective?
What I was really surprised by was the absolute authentic student engagement about how the projects that they were creating absolutely blew my mind in the depth and the scope that students were engaged and developing when we literally got out of their way, offered mentorship, feedback, advice at times, but really allowing the students' creativity to shine and flourish. I think is really what set the trajectory and the focus for my professional career, and what I then became what really became as an expectation for learning in the various schools that I would go to.
Yeah, I would love to see some photos from that if you still have some in terms of what the
Yeah,
before and the after look like. That would be
absolutely.
pretty fun to see. Um, One of the things that I would love to also dive deeper into is we were reading a little bit our team, and your I think the school that you're at right now is very community focused, right? There's a big focus on the togetherness and community and knowing one another, right? How does that, when I think about doing the same thing that I do with these episodes with huge schools, right? There are benefits and drawbacks to each of these, but talk to us a little bit in terms of what the experience is like when you have a more community driven school versus, not a very, very large population. Are there things that you naturally lose out on? Are there things that you still gain while losing out on some? What is that like for you?
I think the strategic advantage that Rosseau Lake College has is our scale, in addition to its location, of course, and our focus on wellness and the balance that we have in the holistic experience of students. But our scale is critical to us. There's a lot of research that was done primarily by an individual named Dunbar, who really analyzed the idea that at 150 is almost a model in terms of an authentic community where relationships are at the forefront and center. An example is every morning here, we gather in a circle outside, regardless of weather. We do have a saying here, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad gear. And the neat thing is for me as the head of school to start my day in a circle with the entire staff and student body, and I get to see everybody in the eyes, and I know how they're doing. I get a good sense of where everybody's at for that day. And we start with gratitude, and random students or staff just shout out what they're grateful for that day. And it sounds contrived, but again, it is very authentic and very visceral here. And it's about setting the day's intentions. And there's a couple of, reminders that are given, and we all look at each other and wish each other a great day, and off we go. And I think when you can come together as an entire community like that, it's special. And what that size of a school population does is students have a voice, they have an identity. And I think that's absolutely critical, is that firm sense of belonging in a community like this is something that is very, very unique about the school that I have not seen in all the other schools I've been at, many of which were very large. And absolutely, when you're at a smaller school like this, there aren't as many options available, let's say in your academic program, of the various, courses that you would be able to offer. Sometimes, you can offer fewer co-curricular programs, for example, when you have a smaller student population. Your sport teams maybe aren't as competitive because instead of selecting from a pool of 35 varsity basketball players, you're lucky to field a team of 12. But at the end of the day, I don't see those things as working against us. I think those things work for us. No students get cut from sport teams here. Everybody gets to participate in an activity that they want. We make sure that the courses and programs we offer are extremely intentional, because if we're going to offer them, we're going to do them to a really high degree and high level of quality. So, to your question, I think our size is one of our absolute strengths and assets.
Right. Yeah, and I could definitely see that, playing and I imagine morning sun comes up, we're all outside. You're giving me my, reminders and sort of what I've got to think about, and I'm being and grateful. What happens when, let's say 100 more students are interested in joining the school? Do you restrict that and say, no, we got to keep our community, we got to keep this at a certain level of a population to continue to do what you want to do? How do you balance actually wanting to scale the school to a large student population, yet still keeping that aspect of being a tight knit community?
Fantastic question. We do cap at 150. And I feel that from a financial perspective, you're very right. The scale of economy is the more you grow your population, and keeping it in check with the amount of labor costs and other infrastructure costs required for a larger population need to be kept in mind. But that would be one of the things to consider, is that, yes, we have a smaller operating budget due to tuition revenue. As a non-for-profit independent school, obviously all the tuition dollars go to the operations of the school:
Mhm.
labor, infrastructure costs, programming, transportation, all of those pieces. So you do have a smaller pool of money to work with, and therefore your margins are very narrow in an organization like this. What that does is it places a lot of emphasis on the importance of philanthropy and fundraising.
Hmm. Right. To continue to be able to do that and have more funds to do these type of programs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, you've mentioned a little bit earlier, a couple minutes ago, this idea of how chemistry class we go out on the lake and we try and experiment a little bit, and English class is taken in the middle of the woods and we're doing spelling tests or whatever it might be. How do you, because you have so much of that nature, that's a big part of your identity at the school, how does that play into the curriculum? Do you leave it to the teachers to say, hey, you've got this beautiful space outside, go do what you will with it? Or is it more that we got to bake it into the curriculum, it's got to be a part of it? What's the connection between nature and being outside versus the academic curriculum that you're working towards?
They're woven together very deliberately. And so I know in the academic program, we have a phenomenal assistant head of academics, Miss Allison O'Mara Armstrong, and she has an intentional structure with teachers where they're demonstrating in their course outlines and planning how the Seven Generations initiative, which is based on the seven grandfathers' teachings of, the indigenous cultures that we try to honor to balance with the Western ways of knowing, is integrated throughout the curriculum, in addition to the outdoor environment, to demonstrate how are you incorporating experiential learning and our natural campus into your program design. So it is an expectation.
Okay, very cool. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense as well, just from that perspective too. I would love to learn more about your staff meetings. I mean, I did a little bit of reading on those staff meetings as well. I heard that you've conducted staff meetings at different types of environments and spaces as well. Could you share a little bit about how how the school or yourself, you're running these staff meetings, where they're taking place? Because I assume if the experience is different for the students, it may also be different for the teachers and the educators themselves.
For sure. So, for example, to begin the year, I will take the senior leadership team um, for a paddle up the Shadow River where we'll all be in canoes and discuss topics at hand, and then come back here into the, in my outer office, and then engage in some deep level planning. And then we will make sure that we're out at the fire a little bit later into the evening, where we find that the relationships and the team building is absolutely critical. I know, for example, our outdoor education department just took the new director of outdoor education, who is coming to get to know them better as he's ready to start up next year. And they went out for a paddle around the lighthouse on the lake, just making sure that we are constantly remembering the land that we are fortunate to reside on, and incorporating that into our environment and into our day-to-day operations as much as we can. I'll often, if I need to meet with a student or a staff member, we'll ask if we can take a walk and talk. And just to be walking while engaging in a various, topic or conversation that is needed. I think there's a lot in terms of our emotional regulation, brain science, that is really quite interesting when you are active and outside and moving. And yes, we have very traditional staff meetings or faculty meetings as well inside of our academic building. So I think we do a very good job of finding a nice balance.
Yeah. And I'd be curious to know, let's say if I was to grow up at a school um, where I would be outside so often, it would be so beautiful. In fact, I think I'll be a bit calmer as well. But then I go off to university and I go to U of T, or I go to McGill, or I go to UBC. And the universities aren't necessarily operating in the same way as the school is, but it's more as a larger institution, a large student population, more chaotic, to put it in the simplest way possible. Do you find that your students thrive, or are they struggling a little bit when they're going post-secondary because the environment itself is so different than what they're used to from a learning perspective?
I think it's fair to say that there would be a range for students. I would say the majority of students that obviously have now become alumni say that it gave them the foundation and the skill sets and the mindset required to go and tackle any environment or any of the challenges, whether it's in post-secondary or the workplace. So that would be the most common feedback that I
Right.
receive. It has equipped them very well, and it gives them a strong sense of self and confidence,
Mm.
which is critical. And then absolutely, there are some that go off to a much larger environment that does operate somewhat differently than we do. And there's an adjustment period required. But again, I would say the primary indicator that I receive is that we are equipping young people with the mindset and the attitude and the aptitude that they are able to go out into the world and apply the skills that they've gained here.
Yeah, and I think it's even more beneficial today than it
Yeah.
has been before, because I sense that I go to different schools and I do a bunch of different work with these different students, and they've changed a lot. The way that they think, the way that they act, everything's changed with students in the last, I'd say, 5 6 years as well. And I think to have a space where you can discover more about yourself and you're not consumed by the world around you, I think that's incredibly powerful for a young teenager who still has so much to learn and so much to grow. I think that that will be, a very, very deep and meaningful experience without them knowing it. And they'll probably realize it when they go off and they're like, you know what, that was pretty good. Because to your point, they have a deeper sense of self.
I completely agree with you.
Absolutely. And I'd love to get your perspective a little bit on this whole AI in education. Now, I don't know if it varies because, the school is in a different space. And, of course, I'm sure there's innovation still happening at the school that we don't take that away, right? But talk to us in terms of what is your perspective towards integrating a technology like AI within schools and within your school specifically?
I think it's imperative that any school is allowing students the time and the space to play with the technology that is in the world around them. They have to be very comfortable with the power and how to regulate the technology around them. One of the things that we always have to consider is that technology comes in a variety of forms, and it is always about innovation. And I think it is the job of schools and program to ensure that we're always allowing students and staff to create, to connect, to problem solve, and to use the tools and resources around them effectively. And again, there's a key word that I like to use there as well, is about regulation, is about understanding the balances that are required in your life. We have a policy, for example, that students have to turn their phones in before they go to bed, our boarding students. So they're not tempted to wake up in the night and game or go online. We want them to be well and to get a proper good night's sleep. In our dining hall, for example, we don't allow any technology by staff or students. That's community time. It's time to have a meal together and engage in real conversations. But
Yeah.
then, the period after lunch in, a particular class, we know that the students are going to be using their technology under teacher direction and supervision, and we want them using and exploring the tools. So I think it's really important to have them exposed, comfortable with it, but yet also understanding that interpersonal connections and human relationships, more than ever, are absolutely critical and fundamental.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that, and probably you do as well, given the experience. But if I feel like if I took away a phone of a 14-year-old child who was on TikTok and they would prefer to be scrolling than talking to their friend, like, do you get resistance? Do you get more resistance now than you have before? Or you find that you don't actually get resistance where you don't even have to ask and kids are turning their phone in because and that would be an ideal world, but I don't know if that's a real world. What does it look like?
It's so ironic you're asking me that question. So, yesterday we had our final faculty meeting, and one of the topics we tackled was the technology policy that the leadership team implemented for this past academic year. And it was incredible to hear from every one of our house parents, our teachers, members of the leadership team, that there was little to zero resistance from students around our technology policies. I would say anecdotally, the students that I talk to admit they feel a sense of freedom and a burden
Mm.
lifted off of them when we remove the temptation. They are very aware and cognizant of the fact that there is an addictive nature to social media, to scrolling, and having an online presence. And we actually had one student laughing that when we had a power outage back in March during the ice storm, and said, I wish we had more no power days. And I was
Oh
like,
wow.
look, that's really curious you're saying that. She goes, we were playing board games. We were telling ghost stories with our flashlights at night in our rooms.
Yeah.
We just played and engaged. And there was no temptation because we didn't have the option. So I think you might be surprised at how many teenagers
Mm.
understand and feel a sense of relief with the freedom from their devices.
Yeah. No, and I think that's refreshing to hear. I think it's nice to see that as well. Would you hypothetically try and instill the same policy if you had a different school?
I think so. I really do. I think we owe it to our kids to, regardless of their context, to embrace and continue to develop the skills for strong interpersonal connections and communication with others.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I tell students these days whenever I go and speak to them, I say, look, your ability to even hold a conversation for 10, 15 minutes. I sense that the more students I talk to, the worse it kind of gets, whether I like it or not, right? That's the reality of what we live in today. And it's about helping them in the smallest ways possible to build those skills that help them thrive in a world where we might not be around, right? And they might have to learn those skills at some point through life, or we can help teach it to them as well. So
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I find that policy very interesting. Absolutely. Um, Your vision is quite ambitious, and I think that's what a vision is for the school, right? Which says this needs to be I think it's something around the best small school in the country, and I think I also read something about a school that everyone wants to go to, right? How are you working towards that vision in a more tactical way? Are they like every day you're looking at that vision and there's a big painted on the school wall? What does that daily tactical motion towards that vision look like for you and the team?
Absolutely. So I would say there's, really three branches. Number one is continuing to build external relations with alumni and community and our neighbors here in Muskoka, raising awareness and interest in the school. That works hand in hand with creating a culture of giving. Philanthropy is what grows schools. As we mentioned, admissions runs the school. That's what keeps the operations going, the lights on, people employed, and the basic costs of operating a school. But advancement and giving is what grows the school. So we just completed a $4.3 million project, our new recreation center, which is a 13,000 square foot facility that has absolutely transformed the student experience here, offering opportunities in some of the tough months and in the weather where they're now inside able to be active and build on our philosophy of having very active, healthy students and staff. So really creating that culture of giving to be able to build new facilities to address any gaps in our infrastructure that we identified is one way that we're elevating this school, and that will help retain and attract more top talent in terms of staff and students. And that's how we can also help stabilize and grow enrollment. And, like any school, your dream is to get a waiting list
Yeah.
and for mission appropriate students. So I think those are the key ways is through really good efforts in external communications, advancement, and really paying attention to our admissions funnel and retaining and attracting students.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the land to continue to build too, right? So you've got that opportunity as well to grow in that sense, and just like you're creating the sports type and the athletic facilities, I know that there's so many more things probably you've thought of that you'd like to continue to build over there. Um, you've described yourself as quite an adventure spirit and also thriving on I don't know this, I really have to figure it out. What's that one moment at the school where you've really had to figure it out?
I would say engaging in a major capital project like our new recreation center. Um, I'm not a constructor, right? And so to take on a major project like that, and of course you have, project management and a construction manager and those things, but all of a sudden the intersection of finance, again, project management, aspects of architecture, everything from, civil works that need to be done with septic, water, electrical, figuring out design features, and then the operationalizing of the building, right? Like how you're supporting your program team to operationalize it properly for the student experience, and then thinking about external opportunities for the community who may want to access or rent the space. So all of those pieces coming together in
Mm.
addition to your full-time job of running a school is an incredible undertaking. And I went into it not overly aware of the magnitude of the work and the scope required. And obviously, I'm absolutely elated and happy we did it. But it was a busy 18 months, let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, it's better that you don't know before you go in, because if you did, you might be changing your mind on it, right? So the naivety is good when you go in, and then you just figure it out as time passes as well. But that's huge. And were students also involved in their voice and saying, I really love this, I really want this? Did you sort of have a bit more of a co-creative approach towards designing this?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome. I always love to hear that, because then the kids get to say, I want this and I want this. And you're like, yeah, okay, we could do this and we can't do this. And it's more, they feel like it's theirs. They feel like they built it. They feel like they own it as well. And I think That's an important part of student success and making sure that they're right part of the community.
For sure.
Absolutely. You also emphasize that the best ideas come from your users, right? How have students, what is one example of something maybe a student one day recommended that has actually been implemented by the school? Have you heard that? How, you take feedback from students and actively sort of put it in this funnel of ideas? Or how does that sort of, your best ideas are from your users thinking play out with yourself and your leadership?
Oh, I would like to say constantly. It's always a highlight of my day when a student will stop by my office and say, "Mr. Crocker, do you mind if I have a moment? I've got an idea." And I I will cancel a meeting. I will attend an online meeting late. I jump on those opportunities. I think it's such a healthy sign when students, aka the users, are thinking of ways that the school and programming can improve. I have a weekly meeting with what I have is called a heads committee, and they are students from every grade that are voted by their peers to represent the student body to meet with me and the two assistant heads every week about improvements. I will have smaller focus groups that I meet with throughout the year as well, focusing on various topics from food services to program offerings, timetable, facilities improvements, all of those kind of pieces. And so we have both structured committees and meetings, and then sometimes I will just have very unstructured opportunities as well. And I do like that the students are very aware that Mr. Crocker is always available to listen to their ideas and their input on how things are going. But I would say two of the areas specifically to your question that I saw a great improvement around was, of course, food. They're teenagers. They're always
Yeah.
hungry. They have great ideas about how we could always continue to, meet their needs to the best of our ability in the dining hall. And the other area is around uniform. They have some really
Oh,
great ideas on how to improve the uniform to, still meet the school's needs, but yet the student needs, again, very active students. We often say that our clothing needs to be outdoor ready.
yeah, right.
So, right after your math test, you could be getting ready to go out to do some cross country skiing on our campus. So we've had some really good input from the kids about clothing that would continue to be comfortable and yet appropriate for our classroom needs, and that's been a really helpful area coming from them.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. I mean, I'd love to sit on one of these meetings because it sounds pretty interesting. I always find the ideas that students bring absolutely fascinating. I mean, food is a big one, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, we want, and I think it's also one of those things where it's important, right, to make sure that I think it's something even I look forward to. I love having a good meal, right, and I hate having a bad meal. So in that way, food's an easy one, and uniform makes a lot of sense too because they're the ones living in that uniform every day. So do you want a different type of outfit? Do you want something more fashionable yet still professional, right? You're sort of finding a good balance there. I love that. Um, I'm going to shift gears here into sort of our rapid fire slash beyond the classroom type of questions. So the first question I have for you, and I'll shoot you a question. You could give me a response in a minute or so. First question on the docs. What's one thing you've changed your mind on recently?
Technology policy. I feel that based on the feedback from our meeting yesterday, that the teachers want an even stricter tech policy where they don't want kids to have access to their phones all day.
Hmm.
That they drop it off when they arrive at school and they get it back after co-curricular. I didn't think the teachers wanted it that stringent, and they do. They love having the kids off their devices as much as possible.
Yeah, that would be a dream for any educator. I'll tell you that.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. You've lived and worked across multiple countries, right? What's one thing about education that's universal across every place that you've been?
I care for kids. Make sure that they're at the heart and the center of all decisions that are made in the school.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. That's what brings us all together in this industry.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Looking back at that younger teacher in Alberta who helped revolutionize classroom design, if you could go back to when you were at that early age back in Alberta, what advice would you give yourself?
to make sure that students are involved in the design process when you're beginning a major initiative.
Hmm. And what would surprise that younger self about who you are today?
I think in a positive way that I haven't lost the joyful spirit of getting out with kids, whether it's on out trip or an outdoor education class where we're canoeing on the lake. I think a very young Dave Krocker would be happy that I still really like to play and to get involved with the student experience. That as the head of school and now at 55 years of age, I still coach the varsity basketball team, and that's the highlight of my year for me.
Yeah, I still love that. Awesome.
Mhm.
And I'll throw in one more. What is one thing that not many people know about you?
That I was a competitive Muay Thai fighter in the years that I lived in Thailand.
Really? There's no way my research would have pulled that out, Dave. So I
Uh,
appreciate you sharing that.
that's a hidden one.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I could probably do a whole other podcast just on that topic, but I'm going to shift gears into our last section here, which is called the final question. So we have a bit of a tradition on the podcast here where we have this little notebook where each of our past guests leaves a question for our next guest. And I'll read out a question from one of our previous guests to which you'll answer. And then I'll give you the opportunity to leave a question for our next guest. You could choose to do that verbally live on the podcast, or you could drop it over an email if that's what you prefer. But I'll start by asking you the question from one of our previous guests, if that's okay. Um, Perfect. Okay. So this question is from Leanne Foster, who is the principal at UTS. And her question is, what is one thing you need to stop doing in order to be a better leader?
Having so many meetings that I don't get to get into classrooms enough just to observe and take in what is happening in the teaching and learning cycle at Rosseau Lake College.
Hmm, I love that. I mean, I'm sure that that also builds a lot of, it makes a highlight of your day if you're able to go to a classroom and spend some time with the
Mhm.
kids and watch them and be with them. I think that that will bring you even closer to them. Absolutely. Uh, Dave, did you have a question that you'd like to leave for our next guest, or would you prefer to shoot that over to me on an email?
No, I do have a question, and I love this, by the way. This is a really neat component that you have to your program. The question that I think you should ask your next guest would be, what would a student say about you as a leader, and what you could do to further grow the student experience in a positive way?
Sounds like a difficult question. Good thing I don't have to answer it, but that's a very thoughtful question, Dave. Um, Anyways, that's sort of the end of the podcast, Dave. Again, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This was such a good conversation. The time flew by, and I had a feeling I could talk to you all day because of how interesting you are. You've got some incredible stories. You're really kind. I could see that shine through. I could see your love for being outside come through just sitting here. And it's been an absolute joy to host you. I appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I also enjoyed the conversation. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and good luck. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care.